All right. Full acceleration.
Hey, it's not kidding around.
It's not. Hey, make short work of the on-ramp there.
For a little tiny 4-cylinder.
Ooh, yeah.
This has power beyond what the stats suggest.
I agree to that. Yes.
The Alfa Stelvio we have not driven before, but this is the 2024
Competizione all-wheel drive for just under $60,000. This has an inline 4, turbocharged, making 280 horsepower and 306 pound-feet of torque. It sounds like adequate. It sounds okay on paper. There's many SUVs that have about 280 horsepower somewhere in there, and they're fine. But this moves like most SUVs don't.
I think that's BMW horsepower, because whatever the number is not correct.
Sandbagging.
It has more than that. It certainly feels like it. This feels like one of the more powerful 4-cylinder turbos we've driven.
And it's not even the 4-leaf clover. It's not even the quad.
No, it's not, because that has the really cool V6 that's available in the Quadrifoglio of the Giulia and the Stelvio.
Well over 500 horsepower.
This has
a lot.
The base engine, but I've said it before on the podcast related to the Giulia. It's true here as well. That base engine seems down on power until you drive it.
I agree.
Great cars, great roads, and all the reasons we love to drive. Road trips, comparisons, test drives, and podcasts. This is Everyday Driver.
I actually drove a Stelvio at a Motor Press Guild track day years ago, right when it came out. I don't know if you remember driving that. We never reviewed it, but I never came away impressed. I wasn't fully swayed. The sedan, upon which is built on the same platform as this, that Giorgio platform, impressed us.
Yes.
We like the sedan,
in all
the Giulia.
forms. Yep.
But the Stelvio just seemed like a market response to what everybody's buying, and that's what every SUV, to me, kind of seems like. And I've never really wanted to drive a Stelvio.
Okay.
And this is changing my mind.
Okay.
The Competizione is a flavor directed at luxury, which is a little bit confusing because competition
Isn't
would
the
imply
word competition?
That would imply, like, we want something lighter.
Wouldn't it be Luxetizione?
Ooh, is that a turbo? That's a Cayenne.
That is a Cayenne Coupe Turbo.
Oh.
In a terrible color.
That's a terrible color.
Very chalky.
That's the competition, but that's kind of what I think everybody thought of about Porsche when the Cayenne first came out 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, you're trying to extract money out of your customers and building an SUV. And that's what I've thought about the Stelvio, but it does not drive like most SUVs. As a matter of fact, I don't think it drives like any SUV.
It has a unique flavor, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
This is built in Italy, and most of the parts on here are Italian. This has a very sharp, quick, crisp turn-in, just like the sedan. I think it's almost on the same level. Maybe not quite as crisp and sharp as that sedan as the Giulia, but this is really kind of fun to drive.
I agree.
We're in an SUV and it's just fun.
It drives much better than I expected to. And what's interesting is this Competizione, that is now the upper trim of the base models.
Right.
The only thing above this is the Quadrifoglio with that 500 horsepower V6, which is awesome, but is another 20 grand more expensive, essentially.
So this is
just under 60 grand, which for a performance SUV, as well, on one level, that's expensive, but that's kind of right in the market for all of its competitors. What's interesting is, the thing that makes this special is it has the adaptable suspension that's only been on the Quadrifoglio, now on the base engine model, if you will. And that is a real revelation for this chassis.
Yeah.
When my wife and I were shopping for our latest Cayenne, because she likes Cayennes, we actually drove a Stelvio, but it wasn't this one with this adaptive suspension. And I had two big takeaways, both of which this solves. First off, the suspension was too soft. Well, you can dial it up here and make it great, make it very athletic and sporty. And secondly, the seats didn't hold me well enough. These are 8-way adjustable seats. That is one of the packages available on this car, also on some of the other Stelvios. But these 8-way adjustable sport seats and that adjustable suspension makes this stand out big time.
Couldn't agree more. The seats are excellent, the driving position is excellent, and this weighs 4,100 pounds, which is less than most SUVs of this size.
Interesting
It gives
point.
it a very lightweight, nimble feel, and with that sharp steering rack, you can feel this. This makes you want to drive. This makes you want to attack corners, and you can with that adaptive suspension. My problem with the adaptive suspension is that it makes the throttle response sluggish. You put it in neutral and then combined with the lack of turbo. We're not in boost yet, and it just kind of is sluggish. But when the car wakes up and you're in dynamic mode all the time, this makes me want to attack everything, and you can confidently. 21-inch wheels combined with this steering ratio just makes you want to attack. It's one of those cars that handles its speed and welcomes it. And through corners too. I like how this drives, and I didn't think I'd like the Stelvio. Carbon fiber drive shaft combined, so that makes it, the driveline a little bit lighter feeling. And everything about this just has a lightweight, nimble feel. Completely unexpected, completely driver focused, and therefore worthy of consideration. And for 60 grand, I think this is the better buy. We all want the Quadrifoglio version, but this is the better buy, and it does feel like a $60,000 SUV.
Yeah, and I think about some of the other stuff that you'd get for 60 grand. Like the obvious competitor, I think, for this in size is the Macan.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
A $60,000 Macan is probably not the Macan you really want. The one
Agreed.
you want is probably 80 or 90, and this at 60 is really satisfying.
But then look here.
It drives very, very well.
All right. I have actually always appreciated the styling of Alfas, this new look. It does look beautiful and looks timeless because of those clean surfaces. There's not a lot of stuff going on, but it's a beautiful sculpture, which very much is an Italian kind of thing. You look at that Alfa nose, it is very Alfa-esque, and it does continue through the taillights. The proportions are good. It just doesn't lend itself to a large back seat and a large cargo area. True. So what are you buying this SUV for? It's really not for backseat passengers of our size.
I mean, it's not. Look, you compare this to the Cayennes and those kind of things. This is Macan sized. It's Genesis GV70 sized. It's the small back seat for small people or small families, and it doesn't have a great hatch. But if you're buying that level of SUV, this is competitive with all of them.
I agree. So jump into the inside, and like Todd said, you've got the moose antlers here. They are attached to the column, but the steering wheel has that start-stop button on it, and it does feel like an event. It does feel like a performance steering wheel, and it's a performance car that it's screwed to. I like the Stelvio. I like the Competizione version of the Stelvio. And the interior is swathed in leather, and the materials have actually gotten better, and the switchgear has improved from those first Stelvios and Giulias that we drove. It doesn't feel cheap. It now feels expensive in here.
There's not a lot of dials and things going on in here. It's kind of a simple interior.
Sure.
And you can look in places and be like, oh, some cost savings happened. But again, these upper levels, like Paul said, it's got actually leather on the dash, which some of the lower levels do not have leather on the dash. They've done things that have stepped it up from the hard plastic that are in some of the base models, and it actually makes it feel like its price point. And it's amazing how just the material change has accomplished that.
Yeah, I'm appreciating the interior design. The shapes are harmonious. Things look and feel good in here, and it does feel like this price point. It feels exclusive, expensive. The seats feel good, and there isn't anything that feels cheap in the inside, and it doesn't look like a cheap SUV.
True.
But nobody knows how this drives.
I agree. It drives much better than you think.
You think it just drives like every other silver, it's moonlight matte.
Yeah.
Like every other silver SUV, and it drives very enthusiastically.
It's very unique. I think this suspension has made a big difference. In fact, in the last one I drove, everything. It's a big deal. Yeah.
All right, we got to switch real quick. Go.
If you're watching because you want a Stelvio or any other car, you need Autotempest.com to search all the car markets and even research dealers.
AutoTempest helps you search nationwide across all the used car sites, including Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Plus, you can get email alerts so you never miss a listing.
We use it to research for our podcast, to search for fun road trip cars, and just because we like to dream. And AutoTempest can even help with new cars, pricing out the options, and getting local dealer quotes. So if you're looking for this Stelvio or any Alfa Romeo, Autotempest.com/everyday can get you the help you need. Autotempest. All the cars, one search.
One of the other things that's changed in the 2024 is this now has a 12-inch screen for the gauge cluster. That hasn't been the case before. It's actually been gauges and other screen combined, and you can change 3 slight variants of the way that the gauges present to you, but otherwise that's brand new. But it still has this small 8-inch screen here for the center screen, and it's slow, and it's a little bit difficult to figure out the interface. It's not a very user-friendly interface, and that's a little frustrating, but you plug in your phone, you get to Apple CarPlay, and all is better again. But I gotta be honest, the original native interface is not very good.
Yeah, it took a while to connect as well. It thought a lot. Now this shifter is a little strange. You got to bring BMW thinking to the shifter.
Yes.
Because to get it into neutral, you don't pull the trigger, you just push the lever. But to get it into reverse or drive, then you do have to pull the trigger.
It is very BMW. I mean, this is an 8-speed ZF, and that's been used in BMW products. It's used in the Alfa Giulia, so it makes sense. It is very well calibrated, though, and I have to say that even though I'm not a paddles on the column guy, I do like these after I got used to them. I mean, you hit them instead of the blinkers and some of that stuff, and you have to get used to it.
Yeah.
But I do like these paddles. They actually, this sounds so ridiculous, but it is a thing. They got the action right. The actual movement of the paddle has a really nice, satisfying, metallic movement to it. And I will say this to you, if you've never driven a car where you were impressed with the feel of the paddles, it only takes once.
True.
As soon as you have one where it feels really good, you're like, oh, it can be like that. And these are excellent. And it's the same thing on the Giulia. So I enjoy driving this. I am genuinely impressed by how much the suspension and the better seats have helped me connect with this vehicle.
I agree, and that is one of the things that brings people to a new brand, because Alfa doesn't have mainstream followers.
Fair.
All the cars out here, they're Hondas, they're Toyotas, they're all the brands that everybody knows and you're familiar with, at least.
This is a niche brand, yeah.
You had a friend who had one and you rode in their Mercedes,
Yeah,
or you know somebody, or your mom has a BMW, or you've got a Toyota or a Honda, and those are known quantities. But to bring new customers to the brand, Alfa's been around a long time, but not in the mainstream consciousness of, we should consider an Alfa. We should maybe think about buying one, and this is a good place to start.
You're right. That's a good point. This is accessible.
Seats, the suspension, the good power, those are the things that make it compelling and bring a different driving experience so that you kind of want to drive it. This is adding up for me.
Yeah.
This is making sense. And that engine is great power, great for altitude here, and I could see owning one of these.
I agree with you. This trim of this SUV is actually the most compelling one, I think.
Yes.
Because look, you can get the bigger boy, but obviously you spent a lot more, and if I'm going to get the bigger engine, I want that in the Giulia sedan. I don't need it here.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
But I look at the stats here and I say, this can't possibly be powerful enough, and then I drive it and go, no, it's fine. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with this level of power.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can interact with it, with the paddles, with the way the gearbox is, this has a limited slip differential that is not common in random family SUVs.
That's true, yes.
Because it's building on the goodness of that Giulia chassis, this becomes an excellent SUV. Also, the fact that when Alfa originally called this the Stelvio, after the Stelvio pass, I was like, did you really? Did you really use an SUV?
Yeah.
But in these upper level trims with this good suspension, I go, okay, all right, I guess it's a throwdown, but I guess you're actually suggesting this can handle, and it can. I mean, we're driving it on a freeway here, but we've had it for a week. We've driven it all over the place. And this became one of those press cars that I took instead of other things.
Oh, good.
And that doesn't always happen.
Excellent.
I mean, we always drive all the press cars as much as we can during the week we have them, but we typically have more than one. We have our own cars, so there's always like, I want to drive that instead of the press car. That always just happens. This, I kept going like, well, I'm only going to have the Alfa for a week. I should drive it again.
Yeah.
It drives really well.
Which means you're going to look forward to driving it, and this is in a sweet spot in the marketplace, because to consider an SUV out of the sea.
Yes.
The blanketing the landscape of SUV choices, they all do about the same thing. They all have about the same safety systems. They all make about the same power on paper. But what is compelling to buy something else and also find something interesting to drive in the SUV category? Porsche certainly covers that. The higher end you go, you can get AMG stuff, and sure, it satisfies that. But at a $60,000 price point that is really compelling and makes you feel proud to own it, I didn't expect that from Alfa, let alone the Stelvio. I just thought it was an also-ran, and it is not.
It's so hard for a manufacturer to enter this market that everybody feels like they have to be in now and end up with anything that feels unique to them.
Yeah.
And the Tonale, which you and I drove and weren't impressed by, it feels like a donation to the segment.
That's a great way of putting it.
This feels like Alfa made an SUV. And I say that as somebody that loves the Giulia very, very much in every trim. This feels very related to that in a very good way. And having this actual 2024 Competizione with these extra bits makes it the one I would buy. I've considered him before. It's why we looked at him as a family. This is the one I would buy. If my son wasn't a tree that could fit in the back, we would consider this seriously. Unfortunately, he's too big for anything Macan-sized, that's where we're at.
It's crazy. Okay, so Alfa has a distinct flavor. In this day and age, especially of platform sharing, engine sharing, especially from a company as big as Stellantis,
yes,
they've made something with a distinct flavor, and for that I say bravo, and it's worth your money. This is good. I'm looking forward to just being here.
Yeah, it's a very nice place to be, and it's here's the thing.
This is
a lot of other things at 60 grand are going to feel better to just sit in.
Yeah.
But very few things at 60 grand are going to feel better to drive.
That's the flavor, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of flavor, we've got a ton of wine in here.
We were just given a bunch of wine, and so look, all of the pockets of the vehicle have wine in it. We keep going around a corner and hearing glass clinking.
Look at all the wine.
We are not drinking and driving. We're going to do one or the other. But anyway, yeah.
It's all clinking in the door.
How very Italian of us to bring wine on our test drive.
Wine in the Alfa test drive.
Yes. Going to go on a test drive. Be sure you bring the wine.